Hey guys, happy Saturday. Welcome to another episode. I got my Strategy B hat on. Today's video, we'll be covering the latest updates all around the Bitcoin market. We'll also be covering updates with Strategy MSTR stock, what my price prediction is using technicals, as well as technicals on Bitcoin. And we're just a couple days away for Strategies Q2 earnings report. It's going to be so great. July 31st. You don't want to miss it. There's going to be so much news that's going to be coming that's going to drive up the price. Now, most of you are wondering how high can it go? We'll go through all of those details. But first off, if you're new, so thrilled that you're here. I would really appreciate hitting the like, subscribing for more related content. Let's begin, guys.
How would I explain it to a fourth grader? I would say to a fourth grader, there are two things you can own. One of the things only goes down in value. One of the things only goes up in value. Which of the two do you want to own? And I would expect the fourth grader to say, I would want to own the thing that goes up, not down. And then I would say, good, that's correct. How much of the thing would you want to own that only goes up? And I would expect the fourth grader to say, as much as I can. And I would say, you're hired. You're Michael Saylor. Because that's all he's doing. That's all he's doing.
I believe Bitcoin is legitimate. I'm not trying to say there's not misuses like everything else, but it is a legitimate financial instrument that allows you to have maybe uncorrelated, non-correlated type of returns. I believe it is an instrument that you invest in when you're more frightened, though. It is an instrument when you believe that countries are debasing their currency, debasing their currency by excess deficits, and some countries are. I believe we have countries where you're frightened of your everyday existence, and if you have an opportunity to invest in something that is outside your country's control, then you can have more financial control. And so I'm a major believer that there is a role for Bitcoin in portfolios. I believe you're going to see that as one of the asset classes that we all look at. I look at it as digital gold, as I said before, and I do believe there's a real need for everyone to look at it as one alternative to, I would say, the optimism that I have in the world. If you want to hedge hope, Bitcoin is not an instrument for hope unless you're hopeful you're going to make a lot of money on it. But I look at it as a vehicle in which you're expressing your financial acumen in something that you're more frightened of the world. You're more frightened of your existence. And I believe there's a great industrial use for it. And I think a lot of people are missing that.
Here we are 120 basically on Bitcoin, which you used to say at 70. And, that was a 60% move or something that you were forecasting as within the next couple of months, or at least this year. Here we are now, what, 150?
I think the 200 to 250,000 for Bitcoin still makes sense because that would still only value it at 25% of the size of the gold market.
Okay.
So I think digital gold means Bitcoin should be worth over $1 million per Bitcoin, and it could happen in the next few years. But maybe pricing 25% of that, especially with Genius Act, makes sense.
Are you going to?
So there you heard it from the big players. Jack Mallers explaining it in simple terms. Larry Fink, very bullish with Bitcoin, as well as Tom Lee saying Bitcoin going to 200, 250,000, with the Genius Bill Act. We're not bullish enough. PlanB also posts Bitcoin Relative Strength Index RSI is almost 75, orange dot. In this bull market, we will see several months with RSI 80 plus represented as red dots like 2021, 2017, 2013, and 2011 in his opinion. So where we are right now is that RSI hasn't really peaked out yet. And with every halving event similar to the last halving event, along with the halving event back in 2017, we started seeing the circles get a darker hue, having red dots. So we're anticipating that we're going to have RSI plus 80. What does that mean? Bitcoin will get somewhere around that 200, 250,000 consistent with Tom Lee's forecast. A White House official said Bitcoin and crypto is going to 20 trillion after passing crypto genius bill. Here we go. I mean, we heard a lot about just with Friday's news how a big time whale sold 80,000 bitcoins on the Galaxy platform. That was like one of the biggest transactions that took place, which is why Friday night the Bitcoin price dropped from 17,000 to 15,000. But when you think about it, that amount of Bitcoin being sold, but it only dropped down that much, and then it started going up. That tells you how bullish Bitcoin is, and we haven't even got to the relative strength peaking out yet. Cathie Wood posted Robinhood offering a 2% match for crypto transfers and VCs and other investors shifting staked ETH into treasury companies to double their money when lockups expire. As with MSTR, BMNR, treasury stocks are a way wirehouse advisors can give clients exposure to Bitcoin and ETH. So obviously Cathie Wood, she's big time bullish on Michael Saylor as well as Tom Lee. That's why she's following the money. She's invested into that. But that just shows the strength. Now we see, treasury companies like with Saylor creating it for Bitcoin. And now we have Tom Lee leading, BMNR under the ETH class. But this is just going to continue to show the change in the financial markets, treasury companies being created with Strategy having a big hodl over 600,000 Bitcoins on their balance sheet. This is just going to change the dynamics of how we look at, the S&P 500 as Strategy gets added to the S&P. Big time venture capitalists, investors are going to just flow their money in. We've already seen that with Coinbase. I mean, Coinbase announcing earnings report on Thursday along with Strategy. What happened with Coinbase? I mean, they entered the S&P 500 and what happened a day later? It went up like 20%. And now Coinbase, at a share price, that's very high. It's just going to continue to go up. And that's going to be the same trajectory that Strategy is headed towards. Difference is Strategy has a significant amount of Bitcoin when you just compare it to Coinbase. They don't have that much, but yes, they are making, money just based on their application that has like tons of users on it with their user interface. Interesting thing, MSTR earnings is, next week. This is going to tell us how much money they've made, possibly roughly around $15 billion of unrealized gains. People don't even realize that with FASB accounting change favoring companies that hold on to Bitcoin. So companies like Mara, which will have Tuesday announcements, Riot, as well as other companies like Tesla, Coinbase having Bitcoin on their balance sheet. All of that will be factored in on their Q2 accounting statements, and that's going to be reflected as unrealized gains, which would basically be your profit margins. But there's going to be so much upside. We're going to hear a lot about Stride, and there's just going to be, a lot more confidence in Strategy B, along with the outlook, the vision to get into the S&P 500. I think we're going to hear a lot about that. So Saylor's just going to attract, how he gravitates towards telling that beautiful story, and everyone's just going to fall for that compelling story that he tells, where he just knows that Bitcoin is the best asset class. It will continue to go up, and he's just going to find ways to tap into the bond market, the treasury market, liquidity market, you name it, through convertible notes, ATMs, bonds. He will use that money to buy up Bitcoin, get more market share around the Bitcoin ecosystem. And at one point, eventually, the company is going to start transforming to become a Bitcoin bank. Think about how Strategy, once they continue to hodl to one Nakamoto, to like 1 million Bitcoin. Think about all of the power leverages they can do within that ecosystem, loaning out their Bitcoin as well as tapping into the AI market. It's going to be huge. And I really do suspect, nice run-ups with the share price. Michael Saylor posts as well. The Bitcoin Defense Department. So everything's operating around the nucleus, which we have Bitcoin. When you think about Bitcoin, it's really, like the transformation of computer science. I mean, on the blockchain, you're awarding, a buyer or seller when it comes to transacting Bitcoin. We got the equity MSTR. That was the initial start off. We got Strife. Strike, Stride, and then the newly created lever Strike for investors who like, more stability, short-term duration holds with, fixed dividend payouts. This is huge. I mean, there's also other leverages like, 2x leverages like MSTX, MSTU, even MSTY dividend payouts. But this is the star method that, really just shows the strength of the company as far as pulling the different levers without fully diluting, the equity like on MSTR. But the company overall has set up such a strong system similar to like the Defense Department with the Pentagon. Let's take a look at the top 100 public Bitcoin treasury companies. So we see a lot of American-based companies, in the top, 10, top 20. But look, there's just like global like countries all around the world that are just popping up. You got Asian countries, you got, Canadian countries, you got, like European countries, you name it. Think about it though. Number one, Strategy MSTR. I mean, look at that. I mean, eventually they're going to have two commas, and it'll be very hard for any other company out there to have two commas, meaning you're up to one Nakamoto, 1 million Bitcoin. But right now they're about like, close to 3% of the entire 21 million Bitcoins available. They've been stacking since 2020 during COVID when the price was much lower, whether Bitcoin was like at 8,000, 20,000, it doesn't matter. We've heard from Saylor that he will continue buying even when the price is over $1 million, even more. But look at this, 607,000, come Monday, what's going to be the amount of Bitcoin that Saylor's going to be announcing on a weekly basis? We continue to hear Saylor continuing to update with the, Bitcoin yield as far as the year to date. And we will continue to see this number climb up as Bitcoin price continues to also go up. What does this mean? Demand is increasing, and law of economics is when a product or service, when the demand goes up, the price by default goes up as well. Let's take a look at Bitcoin technical analysis. So key thing we're looking at is on the daily from like March all the way to like getting close to end of July. We're almost in August. That's impressive. I mean, this year has gone by so quick. But when you think about it, I mean, back in April, we saw that pullback from like January to April. A lot of people were like worried. There was fear, uncertainty. How much lower can Bitcoin go? It got to like 75,000 below the Ichimoku cloud. We were under that cloud for so long. It caused that gravitational pull down. And then we just bursted through that cloud. It's been sunshine and rainbows. This is looking good because it's not running up super quick or anything like that. We don't want that to. We want the RSI to be stable, currently at around 70. But take a look at this. Back in July 13, volume increased significantly. And we know financial institutions like BlackRock, Larry Fink, he continues to buy Bitcoin with the money he has. And he's also buying other asset classes out there as well. When you think about stocks, different, cryptos, but he's devoting a lot of money buying Bitcoin. He understands the name of the game. You look at this though, 118,000 volume is consistent. Bitcoin dominance will continue to, go up over time. And Bitcoin, like we've heard from Tom Lee, I'm also bullish. We're going to get, at least get through 200,000 by end of the year. What does that mean for strategy? Let's say Bitcoin starts climbing up 150,000, in Q3. Q4 we get to 200,000. Just looking at the current price right now, yes, we saw a pullback, with MSTR, July 25th, it was around, 450, getting close to that 500, dollar marker, similar to what we saw back in November of last year, when it ran up like 8x and then it had a pullback. But during that time, Strategy didn't have as much Bitcoin as they have now. So any run up with Bitcoin will exponentially, shoot up the MSTR share price. And a lot of people are creating call options right now, whether August or January 2026, very bullish with, upcoming earnings reports, at least with companies that have Bitcoin on their HODL because of FASB accounting change. The RSI, cooled off to 47. I really do think we're going to have a bounce back. We're still, above the 50 to 200 day moving average. That's the key thing we want to see. I have this forecast of the line drawn out. We're going to get to $1,000 by the year, end of year 2025. I really do think this is definitely a nice price point because with Q2 earnings, this can easily shoot up to like $500 as we, head into the upcoming week and the following week after that. Be on the lookout. Strategy had a slight, mini pullback, but it won't pull back for much longer because it's going to shoot back up. All right, so there you have it. I hope you enjoyed another episode at All I See Is W, where we covered, just updates around Bitcoin, perspective from Saylor and the different partners around him, when it comes to believers with the ecosystem. We heard from, Larry Fink, we've heard from Jack Mallers, Tom Lee, all the big time players at the poker table, and just overall how high strategy is going to be going. When we hear about the Q2 earnings, things are going to be fireworks. Be on the lookout for some excitement. I'll be covering all those updates. But if you're new to this channel, I'm thrilled that you're here. I would really appreciate you hitting the like, subscribing. I'll talk to you on the next one. Take care.